Dun 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 sequel. When Sarah's little brother and best friend discover a talking dummy in an abandoned house, it becomes clear that she's got more to worry about than admissions letters in Goosebumps 2: Haunted Halloween. I'm a big fan of Goosebumps and I was really excited when the first one came out, but it felt a little bloodless. Admittedly, I saw it at a press screening, which are always a little quieter than they should be, press that really want to hoot and holler at stuff. And also, of course, there were no kids there because it was a press screening, so you can't really judge how much it works for the target audience that it's aimed at. This one, on the other hand, I saw on a Saturday with an audience with several kids. There's actually a family right next to me, so it was much easier to work out whether or not the movie really worked for them. The movie kicks off with an aerial shot of the town where it's set, and you can hear a theremin picking up in the soundtrack underneath. This spooky green text comes on screen, superimposed, and when the title kicks up, the soundtrack turns into these kind of like Danny Elfman type strings. Then we cut to a nice crane shot of a town square in this really sleepy little town with lots of autumnal leaves and kids getting ready for Halloween. And this whole setup made me think of those classic family movies that I grew up with, things like Small Soldiers or more obviously Hocus Pocus. The first Goosebumps movie had an interesting, if slightly unexpected, plot that was more like fantasy than like the weak sort of kid-focused horror that you see in the Goosebumps books. Of course, you can't just have a plot of a Goosebumps book for the movie. It wouldn't quite work like that. And of course, the TV show is basically that anyway. So for those die-hard Goosebumps fans out there, they can always go and see that stuff. I say the plot was interesting, but it was at a cost of feeling Goosebumpsy. It didn't feel like it was being that authentic to its source material in some ways. Now, this film has a much more traditional Goosebumps type setup. In fact, it's not only a quicker introduction, but it's also a more standard status quo for these kind of kid, family-friendly, young adult movies. There's a teen girl who's writing an admissions essay to university and she's kind of worried about what the future will hold for her. And then she's got this goofy little brother and his nerdy best friend who's sleeping over. And unfortunately her mum, who's a nurse, who are the real heroes, had to work a double shift, so she's got to look after them. And then the kids are searching through this abandoned house and they find an evil dummy. So far, so Goosebumps. The only way they could be more authentic is if it was about kids moving into a new home or going to a summer camp. It's pretty clear from the first minute that this film has a lower budget than the first film as well. It's not surprising. Goosebumps did okay for itself, but it didn't really make a big splash commercially. And I was kind of surprised to see that it had a sequel. So obviously they took some sacrifices in order to get it made. And one of the places where that really impacts, unfortunately, is the quality of the acting from the children involved in it. The first movie had some good kid actors. This film, unfortunately, has some pretty hit and miss performances, especially from the lead girl. And her brother and his best friend are less good overall, but are probably more consistent in terms of their quality of performance. On the plus side, there are some good performances from some quality comedy actors in kind of cameo-sized roles, most notably Ken Jeong and Chris Parnell, better known as a voice actor. He's Jerry in Rick and Morty. But overall, my feeling from this first half hour of the movie is that it's really throwbacky. It does have that classic kind of 90s family comedy feel to it, and that's no bad thing. There are some token efforts to make it more modern. A kid makes a cryptocurrency joke at one point, which is actually pretty funny. And they also go to like a PG rave, you know, where no one's drinking or taking drugs and everyone's just having a lot of fun with glow sticks. That's where the girl sees her boyfriend kissing another girl. Bit of heartbreak there for some reason. It doesn't really motivate anything in the plot. Don't worry about it, mate. Let him go. He's a bad actor anyway. Long distance relationships never work out, and hopefully you'll be going to Colombia in the spring if I've understood the plot arc of this film correctly. Just watch Lady Bird, it's all explained in there. Once Slappy's out on the loose, he follows through with his master plan of making all the Halloween stuff in town come alive. And this is a central concept that's really good fun. I remember there's a Buffy episode that has a really similar plot where everyone's costumes turn them into what their costumes portray. And this film does that with a little bit extra thinking around that, and they have a lot of comedy fun playing with stuff like decorations coming to life. For instance, in the first sequence where Slappy brings everything to life, he's like in Walmart and they have all those really cheap decorations around, like rubber rats and bats and those little skulls with spider legs coming out of them. They all come alive. The rubber rats have still got their parts, their heads are kind of separate, so they're wiggling around, and then the skulls are scuttling away. And later on, there's a giant balloon sculpture of a spider that comes alive and is equal parts sweet and slightly scary, probably for the little ones in the audience. This is where the film really comes alive, no pun intended. It's well developed and conceptualized, it's got nice execution, there's some clever designs, and they've really thought through the comedic stakes of what they could do with Halloween decorations. The film also has a couple of genuine scares, mostly revolving around the dummy, Slappy. In particular, there's one sequence at the end of the film that involves a human ventriloquy dummy, which I think is really well pitched at the age group, but is probably right at the top end of the scares that you could tolerate with the younger ones who the film is aimed at. Goosebumps 2: Haunted Halloween takes aim at some of the plot and thematic problems of the first film, and I think is largely successful in resolving them. There's less mystery, less big fantasy elements that feel out of place, and instead a more streamlined, grounded, and more goosebumpsy feeling movie that has a few more effective scares in it as well. Unfortunately, as a result, it also feels less original, and that coupled with the lower budget means that the film comes out distinctly average. When I'm in doubt about a film like this, I lean on the audience response, and luckily there were kids in the screening. They were mostly quiet, which means they were paying attention, but they weren't really laughing or gasping when something scary happened, which means the film wasn't captivating them in a way that a better film might. So Goosebumps 2 is pretty much a case of what you see is what you get. There's a spooky house, there's cursed treasure, there's a couple of light scares and some good jokes, and otherwise the movie is relatively forgettable. In other words, it's pretty middle-of-the-road family fare. That's it from me, but I'd love to hear what you thought in the comments below. I know a number of you probably came to the channel through my Goosebumps reviews, so I'd be especially happy to hear from anyone who's also a really big fan of Goosebumps. Hope you're enjoying your lead up to Halloween. Have a good one. Bye for now.